what do I do if I don't know who I really am then?
Yeah, talk to your friends. You can go through a simple little exercise, which is find a friend who loves you and you love them. Somebody who at 3 o'clock in the morning you would take their call and you know that they would take yours. Do not do this with family. Do not do this with a girlfriend, boyfriend, or spouse. Those relationships are too close. Do this with a best friend and ask them the simple question, why are we friends? And they're going to look at you like you're crazy because you're asking them to put into words a feeling, which is very hard for human beings to do. They're going to probably say, I don't know, why are you asking me this? And then you stop asking why and you start asking what, because it elicits rational answers. And you say, come on, what specifically is it about me that I know that you would be there for me no matter what? And they'll hem and haw, and you can't help them. You can't let anybody else help them. You have to let them sort of struggle through the process. And they'll start describing you. I don't know. You're smart. You're funny. I trust you. And you have to play devil's advocate. Great. That's the definition of a friend. You have that with lots of people. What specifically is it about me that I know you would be there for me no matter what? And again, they're going to go through this a few rounds, and eventually they'll give up. Eventually they'll give up and say, look, I don't know. All I know is, and this is what my friend said to me, all I know is, Simon, I don't even have to talk to you. I can just sit in a room and I feel inspired by you. And I got goosebumps because I had an emotional reaction to something that they said about the value I have in their lives. And if you do this with multiple friends, they will say similar, if not the exact same thing, because the thing you give to the world, your why, is the value you have in other people's lives. So the way that you find out your why, the way you find out your value, is by asking the people who value you. To go on the pursuit by yourself and go sit on a mountain, you don't have objectivity of yourself. But other people who love you and care about you with all your warts and everything, they can tell you why they want you in their life. And that is the why, that is your value, that is your why. It's the space you fill in their lives, which is why we're not friends with everyone.
Simon, this is such a joy to do. I've been a long time admirer of your work, so thank you so much for joining me first.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Can I ask, I always believe that parents shape us in ways that we maybe didn't expect. Mm-hmm. When you think about yours, what do you think you're running towards, and what do you think you're running from, Simon?
When I think about my parents.
Your parents and your upbringing and how it shaped you.
Well, I mean, I had a pretty amazing childhood. I mean, I got to live on 4 continents by the age of 10 years old. And my sister and I, even though we're very different personalities, we're incredibly close because of the way we grew up, because we kept getting uprooted and moving schools and moving friends, but we always had each other. And again, even though we're pretty different personalities, we're both very comfortable being in new places. We're both very comfortable sort of figuring stuff out, pretty resourceful, because that's how we grew up. When you say what you're running towards or running from, I mean, based on my childhood, I mean, it's made me comfortable in the unfamiliar. And so when things are not moving for me, I'm very comfortable changing course, because to me, being resourceful is fun. You know, it's not a panic. It's more like a puzzle. So, I mean, I'm very grateful to my childhood for that. When you say what I'm running from, because we kept moving a lot, you know, I don't have childhood roots. I don't have a childhood home that I grew up in. The first home that I grew up in, I was 10 years old. So, I mean, I have a childhood home from the age of 10, but I don't have nothing earlier than that, because we didn't stay in one place for very long. And I think because of the lifestyle that I've led, even for my career, I traveled a lot. And staying home became like the best thing in the world. So I think the one thing that I guess I'm running from is the constant uprooting. I actually really like having a home base now.
Mm-hmm. Can I ask, I spoke to Asaf before the show, who introduced us, and he said, you need to ask Simon, what do you want to be when you grow up? Which was a strange question, but I thought I would roll with it given he made the intro. What's the answer?
I mean, as a little kid, I wanted to be an astronaut, and I went to space camp in Huntsville, Alabama at the age of 13. And I liked the idea, and then I liked the idea of being an aeronautical engineer, but I wasn't. That sort of didn't last for very long. But and somebody asked me once, why did you want to be an astronaut? Which I'd never really thought about. And if I go back and thought, the reason I wanted to be an astronaut is I wanted to be able to go to a place and have a perspective. I wanted a perspective of the world that most people don't have. And then I wanted to come down and tell people what I saw so they could be struck with the same wonder that I got to have. And then I sort of smiled when I gave the answer and realized I am an astronaut. I try and see the world from a different perspective, and I try and report back what I see with the hope that people will see the perspective that that I see as well, to help them see the world in a new way.
If you apply like another why to that, why do you want to inspire people with wonder and awe on a thing that they haven't seen? Is it because you love to delight people? Is it because you love to educate people? Like,
I think it's just ingrained. I believe in sharing. I think it's selfish not to share. There are people who, when they find something magical, they want to hoard it and hide it. If they figure something out, they don't want to tell anybody because they believe that it gives them some sort of, upper hand or some sort of advantage in life or at work. And I like sharing. I like, if I see something, I want to share it with people. If I discover something, I want to tell people about it. I just think it's a nice way to live a life. And I think everybody should do the same. Sharing your feelings with your loved ones, sharing your ideas with the people you work with. All those things matter. There's an entire section of the bookshop called self-help, and there's no section in the bookshop called help others. We've overdone it on taking and hoarding and being self-involved. And I think our society could do with a little more balance, a little more giving to manage all the taking.
You've shared so much wisdom over the years, and one thing that kind of struck me when I was kind of thinking about this conversation was there a catalytic moment in the rise of Simon Sinek? Was it the TED Talk in 2008, 2009? Was it the second book? Was it the first book? What was that moment when actually the Simon Sinek brand really became so well known?
Like so many things, there's not an answer to that question. That's like asking me, when you started working out, when was the moment you got into shape? It's like, I don't know the answer to that question. There's a process that you follow and you find yourself in shape. It's an evolution. It's not a switch. And so the same is for my career. I committed myself to a process that I believed in and still believe in desperately. One is starting with why. I believe desperately that if both in your own mentality and the way you talk and communicate, you start with what you believe rather than what you do. And the second thing is the law of diffusion of innovations, which is all populations sift across the standard deviation, the bell curve. If you have high performers, you have low performers, and you have an average, always, regardless of the size of the population. And the law of diffusion tells us that the early adopters are more likely to take a risk and try something new. And you need to get a critical mass of those, 15 to 18%, in order to create a tipping point. Because the majority won't try something until someone else has tried it first. And most people, when they're trying to build a brand or spread a technology or share an idea, whatever they're trying to do, they aim all of their effort at the majority because that's where the market is, right? Except that's completely wrong, because the market is cynical and practical. They want to know, what do I get? Will I get my money back if it goes wrong? They're constantly sort of pushing for more, where the early adopters will spend more money, more energy, more effort to be a part of something that reflects their beliefs. And once I learned that, and I started talking about what I believed, I started talking about why, the people who I preferred to work with and chose to work with were the ones who shared my beliefs. They said things like, "You're onto something. I don't think it's perfect, but I think you're onto something special." Even though they could pay me very little money, I would work with them. And in the early days, I was living hand to fist. I mean, I didn't have a dollar. Or, for example, because I started with why, they would say, "There's somebody you need to meet who I know will believe what you believe." Or believes what you believe. And I said yes to those introductions, where the ones that they said, "There's somebody you should meet," whatever. It was always financially driven. I sort of would be a little more cynical. And I remember a real life example of a guy who called me up and very, very early on. And remember, again, I was living hand to fist. And the guy said to me, I remember the exact phone call. He said, "I got your number from whoever." He said, I've heard you're good at your work. Convince me why I should hire you." And I said, "Don't." Because anybody who says, "Convince me why I should ... has just told me that they're not an early adopter. That's not a position of curiosity, right? That's a position of sell to me. And so I would turn down business from people who sat in the majority and focus exclusively on the early adopters. And that's what made my career and my brand grow. Because I didn't spend any money on marketing.
What would an early adopter say instead of "Sell me why I should hire you"?
No, I mean, it's like I said, they show it with curiosity. Like, "I've heard about you. Your ideas are really interesting. I'd love to learn more." you're onto something. It's not perfect, but I think you're really onto something. Like that's what early adopters. Early adopters sound really curious.
When you think about why and the importance of why, is there ever a wrong why? You know, a lot of people demonize people for, I just want to make as much money as possible.
Yeah.
That, especially in our industry and in technology, that seems to be the wrong thing. We should have impact with our technology. We should save the planet, save the, whatever it is. Is there ever a wrong why?
So you're confusing a couple things there. You're confusing. So a why is not a goal. A why is not an outcome. Making money is an output. Like money is a result. Profit comes at the end of the equation, not at the beginning of it, right? A why is an input. It's a motivation and a drive. And so the question I would ask is, why do you want to make money? Do you want to just roll around on it on your bed like Scrooge McDuck and throw money in the air? Is that what you want to do? Every night you want to sit and count the pennies in the bank account? Is that what you want to get your hits from? You know, there's a reason why. And the reason why people who are driven solely to make money are sometimes vilified is because it is largely a selfish pursuit. And it's usually some sort of score or some sort of validation or some sort of selfish desire to live a certain lifestyle. And I also equally don't believe in, you know, we're doing this to have an impact and change the world. That doesn't mean anything either. You know, my why is to inspire people to do the things that inspire them. That's why I get out of bed in the morning. And I have a vision of the world that does not yet exist. I imagine a world in which the vast majority of people wake up every single morning inspired, feel safe wherever they are, and end the day fulfilled by the work that they do. And I will do anything and everything I can to help build that world, right? So I believe leaders, for example, are one of the best ways we can build that world. That's why I've chosen to celebrate, support, and find the leaders that I believe are more likely to build the world that I want to live in. I think we've overemphasized. I said this before. I think we've overemphasized rugged individualism, but the problem is we are social animals and we live in community. We have neighbors and we have teams and we have families and we have friends and we live in community. And to be driven by selfish pursuit is can be in its extreme destructive to society, destructive to community, because it leaves other people feeling alienated or left out or stepped on or ignored. And so there's no problem with making money. But money as a pursuit, as a motivation, it'll run out. Because what'll start to happen is your identity will become wrapped up in that score. So if you lose a lot of money, does that mean you have no value? If somebody else makes more money than you, does this mean that you're less valuable than they are?
Yeah. So I had a tax bill not long ago, and it was horrifying. And I felt a lot less of a person. Yeah. I always identified as bluntly the rich one in my family or the rich one in my friend group. Yeah. And suddenly I was halved in net worth. Yeah. And I felt significantly less valuable.
Yeah. So, I mean, I've never attached my identity to my bank account. You know, if you look at any blurb that I've given on the back of a book, for example, my identity is not even connected to the work that I do. It says optimist, an author, is what it says. So if I stop writing books and I no longer write books, I'm still an optimist.
This was my question, which is like you said before, I define myself by who I am and not what I do.
Yeah.
Bluntly, I do the opposite because I've only ever known who I am by what I do as an adult. I started at 17.
Yeah.
This is me. I've never traveled.
Sure.
Is that wrong of me?
I mean, wrong. I mean, right or wrong. I there's no judgment as to what's right or wrong, but you're more likely to find a lifetime of self-love and security and confidence and strength of identity when you're able to define your value based on what you give to people, not what you take. That's just sort of how the human animal works. It's Mother Nature's attempt to get us to look after each other and take care of ourselves and take care of each other. So is it wrong? I mean, no, you can live your life however you want. I have no judgment how you live your life. You do you. And I choose to live my life the way I choose to live it. But all things come at a cost, right? There's nothing for free in this world, nothing. There's a cost for the money you make. And if that cost is worth it to you, then batter up. You know, if that cost at some point becomes not worth it, if the cost is too high to your sense of self-worth or confidence, or then maybe reevaluate the strategy.
When you say like, who I am, I think a lot of young people don't actually know who they are.
Yeah,
and a
lot of old people don't know who they are.
But a lot of comments ahead of us doing this conversation, you had thousands of comments, and a lot of people ask the simple question of, what do I do if I don't know who I really am then?
Yeah, talk to your friends. You can go through a simple little exercise, which is find a friend who loves you and you love them. Somebody who at 3 o'clock in the morning you would take their call and you know that they would take yours. Do not do this with family. Do not do this with a girlfriend, boyfriend, or spouse. Those relationships are too close. Do this with a best friend and ask them the simple question, why are we friends? And they're going to look at you like you're crazy because you're asking them to put into words a feeling, which is very hard for human beings to do. So they're going to probably say, I don't know, why are you asking me this? And then you stop asking why and you start asking what, because it elicits rational answers. And you say, come on, what specifically is it about me that I know that you would be there for me no matter what? And they'll hem and haw, and you can't help them. You can't let anybody else help them. You have to let them sort of struggle through the process. And they'll start describing you. I don't know. You're smart. You're funny. I trust you. And you have to play devil's advocate. Great. That's the definition of a friend. You have that with lots of people. What specifically is it about me that I know you would be there for me no matter what? And again, they're going to go through this a few rounds, and eventually they'll give up. Eventually they'll give up and say, look, I don't know. All I know is, and this is what my friend said to me, all I know is, Simon, I don't even have to talk to you. I can just sit in a room and I feel inspired by you. And I got goosebumps because I had an emotional reaction to something that they said about the value I have in their lives. And if you do this with multiple friends, they will say similar, if not the exact same thing, because the thing you give to the world, your why, is the value you have in other people's lives. So the way that you find out your why, the way you find out your value, is by asking the people who value you. To go on the pursuit by yourself and go sit on a mountain, you don't have objectivity of yourself. But other people who love you and care about you with all your warts and everything, they can tell you why they want you in their life. And that is the why, that is your value, that is your why. It's the space you fill in their lives, which is why we're not friends with everyone.
What if you don't like it? What if you don't like what you hear back?
It doesn't exist. It doesn't exist because if you have an emotional reaction to what they say, if you get goosebumps or you well up, what they're telling you is who you are. Now, you may not always be acting as you should and acting as who you are. You may not be living your why, but deep down inside, when you are at your natural best, this is how you're showing up. And so it's not a question whether you like it or not. It is who you are. And what you'll find is it's quite beautiful and empowering because you get to discover the reason people love you.
Does who you are change?
No. Our why is fully formed by our mid to late teens.
So this is really interesting because I speak to many people about relationships as well.
Yeah.
And they say, you always want to wait until you're 40 until you get married because you don't know who you are when you're young. And when you're 40, you know who you are and you've got a lot more grounding in that personality. And I'm like, well, one, if you don't change, actually, that's irrelevant. And two, I kind of think we're always changing. Just because you hit 40, it doesn't mean you're not going to change personality, whatever that is. Yeah. How do you feel about that statement of wait until you're 40 till you get married because then you know who you are?
I don't think it's, I think any kind of dogma is unhealthy. People telling us when we should and shouldn't do something based on their experience, not ours. Guidance is helpful. Advice is helpful, but do or don'ts. I don't know about that. But the fact of the matter is our why, the core of who you are, is done. It's set. The question is, are you living to that core? Are you in balance? Are you saying and doing the things you actually believe? Are you operating based on your values? When I talk about why, how, and what, it's all three pieces that matter. It's not just knowing your why. It's also how do you operate and what are you doing? That those three pieces need to be completely in balance. And so, of course, you're in constant improvement. And of course, you're learning how to, be more self-aware and make other people feel heard and be a better communicator and learn how to deal with conflict better and learn how to have difficult conversations and learn how to not be reactive and have a temper and all of these things. Of course, you should be in constant improvement. There's no such thing as a perfect person. But the fundamental of who you are at the core of your personality, the core of your identity, the core of the value you give to the world is completely fixed. Which is why when you start let's say, becoming more, you make money, the end all be all. Your old friends who knew you back when will say, it's like, I don't even know who you are anymore. You've changed. It's like, I don't know who you are anymore. It's because you become distracted by something else other than being your best version of yourself. So, no, your why is fixed. Of course, you sometimes can ignore it and you can live outside of balance of it. So it's not about finding out who you are. It's really going back to basics is really what it is. But yeah, I mean, I hope you're in a state of constant improvement and being a better version of you all the time.
Speaking of going back to basics, trust is just the foundational pillar of any relationship, really.
Professional and personal.
Yeah. Do you start relationships with full trust and it's there to be, lost, or actually incremental and it's there to be gained over time?
Well, I mean, trust, or you can't start with deep, meaningful, from day one. That doesn't exist. And that would be, if you just even think evolutionarily, that would be really dangerous. Right? But I do believe in starting with a basic level of trust. And I know this from leaders. Great leaders never say to their team, prove to me why I should trust you. It's the opposite. Great leaders have to earn the trust from their teams because the leader's supposed to be the provider and protector for the team, right? So the team has to know, can we trust this person? They're going to look after us. They're going to stab us in the back for their own promotion. I trust very quickly, and obviously I've been burned a couple times, but I'd rather be burned a couple times and trust too quickly than trust too slowly and sort of mess it up and never earn trust, because that's pretty lonely. There's no right or wrong. I think, it's a scale, and and people who trust a little slower, I think, is just as healthy. But you have to, at some point, I think, coming in with a little bit of like, I'd like to trust this person, being a little bit hopeful about it. Trust is like a dance. I mean, it gets deeper and deeper and deeper the more vulnerable and the more open you become with someone.
Did getting burnt change your mindset? I've been burnt before too, and it really made me a lot more visceral in how I am with trust. And I don't trust people, period, until they prove something, and then it's like, but I used to be a lot more trusting.
Well, think about that, right? You said, I don't trust people until they prove. That means you're showing up with like a checklist, and you're evaluating them like they're a scientific study. Right? Well, people can feel that, and so they're probably not going to put their walls down either. And what you're communicating is, I don't trust you, which means they're not going to trust you back. I mean, you'll have a hard time earning trust if you don't trust people. It's not a one-way street. Trust is a two-way street. So if you show up distant and cold and untrustworthy for whatever you've been burned in the past, well, you're going to have a really hard time getting trust back also. So you think you're protecting yourself, and the great irony is you're putting yourself in a little box, a very lonely little box. That's what happens when you build walls around yourself to protect yourself. You end up in a little dungeon, a little prison. Yes, I've been burned, and yes, I got cynical, and yes, I had to learn to break those walls back down again. And yes, I got burned and they went back up, and I learned to pull them back down again. But, I tried very hard not to keep reinforcing the walls every time things went a little sideways or things got a little uncomfortable. I got burned a couple of times because, as I said, excessive protection of oneself, you end up in a cell.
Can I ask a really hard one on trust? But I've spoken to many friends before where maybe faithfulness has not been in their marriage, and they go, how can I ever trust them again? How do you feel about the ability to rebuild trust in relationships, in marriages once lost? And what you've seen and learned over the years through your work around that?
Well, I think if somebody's cheating, it's usually a sign that there's something missing in their relationship, right? So, and sometimes it's repairable and sometimes it's not. And so...
Do you think it's missing in their relationship or in themselves?
Well, I mean, all of the above, right? But that sounds like an opportunity for communication. Now, it hurts when someone cheats, obviously, and there are different ways in which people cheat, some which are unforgivable, some of which are forgivable. It's not just the cheating; it's the lying and the deceiving, and that goes with it. If the relationship is broken, and somebody seeks solace from someone else, then that's an evaluation for the relationship you have and whether it's worth clinging onto. But I think usually when that happens, it's a sign that there's been a total breakdown in communication, obviously a total breakdown in trust. And that doesn't mean that the relationship should or shouldn't survive. That's for the couple to decide. But generally, I believe it's a red flag that means that we should probably evaluate what's happened, or maybe it's too late. But what I find very, people who usually stray from the relationship is because they're either feeling something in themselves or in their relationship that they're not telling their partner about. And that's really selfish, because relationships should be an act of co-creation. My girlfriend and I, we sort of have this, it sounds pretty aggressive, but it's actually very loving, which is neither of us has the right to make decisions unilaterally about the relationship, because it's our relationship, not my relationship. It's not her relationship, it's our relationship. So you can't just make a unilateral decision about what the relationship should or shouldn't be without talking to the other person.
What does that mean
we're
in
a partnership.
practice?
We're a partnership. So to make it in business terms, let's say you have a 50-50 business partner,
Mm-hmm.
and they just made a decision about somebody they're going to sell to or buy from without ever talking to you. That business partnership's not going to work.
Sure.
Right? Because somebody's making a unilateral decision for the business without talking to the business partner. Now, they may know what you're going to say, and you may agree with them, and it may be a perfectly legitimate decision, but it's the feeling of being left out of that decision that will fundamentally break the business relationship. Well,
is that not where trust comes into play, though, where it's like you trust her to make the best decision. You trust her to know what's right for you as a partnership. You cannot scale in a lot of cases, especially in business, if you require the partnership. You have to delegate to different people within a partnership.
I think you're talking about delegation, which is different than partnership, right? Delegation, sure, if you have a division of labor, but good partnerships, they're constantly talking, constantly checking in with each other, constantly saying, I'm thinking about doing this, what do you think? Because it's not just that they think that they're I have the best, good intentions have nothing to do with this. Even in relationships, people have good intentions with some of the decisions they make, or worse, sometimes they're trying to solve a problem because they are basing whatever on an assumption, right? They're basing whatever their actions are and their decisions are based on an assumption they have of what the situation is or what the other person is thinking without ever talking to that person. And that's what I'm talking about. Like in a business relationship, if you just assumed what your partner wants to do, but you don't actually know, like, do you know this 100% to be the case? The answer is, I don't. Well, then maybe you should go find out.
How do you decide the decisions that can be made unilaterally versus not unilaterally?
It's in a relationship.
The restaurant that you go to for dinner, you can decide.
You'll find that out in the relationships. You'll find out that maybe your partner says, from now on, you make all decisions about restaurants, right? I just don't care. You're the foodie. I like eating. You decide, right? And that's fine. But that came from communication. And my point is not that you can't make decisions by yourself. My point is that there's communication before any of these decisions are made. And if there's a piece of communication that says, I want you to do this, and the same is in business partnerships, right? Look, I don't really care about hiring. You're like a genius at guessing personalities and understanding personalities. I'm an idiot when it comes to it. So you can make all the hiring decisions. I'll agree with everybody you hire. Great. The point is you had a communication. Versus you unilaterally just doing all the hiring and just walking to the office one day and be like, I hired 3 more people. And they'd be like, what? Even if they know that you're skilled. And you'll be like, what? I'm so much better at this than you are. Why would I show you? I'm better at this. You always tell me I'm better at this. It's not a question of whether the decision should be made by you or not. The question is, how do they feel? Do they feel left out and included? And if you have communication about the partnership and what the delegation of, then you've communicated. The only thing I'm advocating for is openness and honesty and communication.
What are the reasons people aren't? Is it not fear most of the time? Fear of the response, in which case you'd almost say it's not selfish, it's on the other person for not creating that environment where they can say, actually, you make me feel really uncomfortable when you do that, because they're scared of, well, it's your fault anyway, you did this. It's
fear shows up in personal relationships and professional relationships, that we make decisions because we're afraid of what the other person will think or feel. We're afraid of hurting their feelings. We're afraid of what they'll say to us. We're afraid of it going wrong. We're afraid of this. We're afraid of that. You're right. And fear is a very, very common and terrible motivator for decision making. And we're all guilty of it all the time. And I see this, having uncomfortable conversations and being uncomfortable is not fun for anybody. Mm-hmm. It's uncomfortable. But I see this, it skews younger generations really work hard to avoid being uncomfortable and having uncomfortable conversations. They're incredibly confrontation avoidant, which is why you see things like ghosting so common. When relationships break up, we've been dating for 6 months, I don't really like you anymore and I want to break up, but it's so uncomfortable to break up with you, I'll just ghost you. which is selfish, right? It's because it's easier for me, even though it's really, really caustic and destructive for you. But I'm not thinking about you, am I? I'm thinking about me, right? I'd rather you have a big fight and put some closure on it, you know?
Why is this generation more avoidant than prior generations?
I mean, there's a million reasons. You know, some of it was parenting. It's very, you know, our parents, the parents of this generation are much more coddling.
Yeah.
By the way, the parents would tell you that. You know, it's not like some deep scientific evidence here. Like the parents would be like, shit, you know, I raised them that way. Whoops, you know. It's partially we can't ignore the impact of social media, and we're constantly comparing ourselves to other people. You know. The way we seek validation, the identity we have of ourselves comes from keeping score. How many likes do I have? How many followers do I have?
Should we give participation medals?
No, it's a bad idea. And there is actually evidence of that it actually backfires, because the people who do earn, you know, first or second medals, their accomplishment is devalued, right? And the people who come in last and get a medal, it makes them feel worse because they know they didn't earn it. So, you know, there's actually good evidence on that actually doesn't work.
Is there ever a good reason to tell a white lie?
Well,
there was a brilliant quote. It's like, trust is built on telling the truth, not telling people what they want to hear.
Yeah.
Darling, I love tonight's dinner that you cooked.
Yeah. Okay, so we human beings do lie. Everybody's a liar. Everybody tells lies. And we do it well-intentioned sometimes because we don't want to hurt somebody's feelings. Somebody gives you, you know, a tie for your birthday, a jersey for your birthday. It's the ugliest thing you've ever seen. And they say, what do you think? And you go, oh my God, I love it, which is a complete lie, but you don't want to hurt their feelings, right? I personally don't believe there's ever a reason to tell a white lie, because if you tell one, you start telling more. And if you can get away with one, you can get away with more. And eventually those little white lies start to compound and they become bigger white lies. I think there are ways you learn to tell the truth. I don't believe in brutal honesty. Honesty never has to be mean or mean-spirited, right? So my rule is I don't lie, right? So for example, if the food is kind of bland in a restaurant, too salty, I don't know, what doesn't matter. I'm not necessarily going to make a stink out of it. I'm not going to call the waiter and be like, let me tell you that this, right? But if the waiter comes over and goes, how's the food? Everybody looks up and goes, yeah, it's good, it's fine. Yeah, good. We all just told a lie at the table. My rule is if he asks, I'm going to tell him. So how's the food? If I'm honest, it's a little too salty for me. You asked, right? So, and so if you know, if you're enjoying the food that your girlfriend made for you, and she doesn't ask, well then enjoy it. You don't have to unless she wants to hear it, you know. But if she says, "What do you think of the food?" you know, you don't have to be mean about it. You can say, you can find something you like. Oh my God, I'm so grateful that you make me dinner. I'm the luckiest person alive that you spent all this time and energy to make me dinner, and it's that you did that makes me feel loved, which is a true statement, right? Or if I'm honest, I liked yesterday's better, right?
The art of the pivot.
It's not. It's being honest, and it's not being brutal. You know, do I look fat in these jeans? I like the other jeans better, which is true, as opposed to, yeah, you look fat in those jeans. That's just mean-spirited, right? Both are honest, but one is mean. So, you know, go ahead. Take a look at the time now. And so you know the time now, and we know the date. And for the next 48 hours, you may not tell a single lie, zero. You will find it unbelievably difficult. You will learn just the amount of lies we tell over the course of 48 hours. Little white lies, you know, how's your food? Yeah, it's good, it's fine. You know, stuff like that. So do a little challenge for the next 48 hours.
Do you have to check yourself?
What do you mean?
Like when you started, like, I'm never going to tell a lie. I'm always, if asked,
it's hard. It's very, very, very hard.
And do you slip back into
it? Of course. I'm a human being who doesn't want to be, you know, I don't want to hurt people's feelings. And sometimes I don't know how to do it. And sometimes I overdo it on the evasiveness, because I'm trying not to. Yeah, for sure. It's a work of constant progress because I'm a human being. But do this test. I've done it, by the way.
I'm going to do this 48 hours.
You cannot tell a lie. Absolutely zero. Now, again, doesn't mean you have to be mean, but you cannot tell a single lie for 48 hours.
Are you going to get the waiter at
difficult.
dinner to come and ask me how my food is?
No, I'm not. No. I'm just going to allow life to surround you as life does. So there's no reason for me to set it up. But give it a try. You'll see how difficult it is.
I'm going to try. That's on speaking. The alternative is receiving and listening. What does great listening mean? Because people are like, oh, it's about listening. And I'm like, great, what does that mean? There's different types of listening.
Yeah, so active listening is not about hearing the words spoken, right? Like sometimes we're watching television and somebody's trying to talk to us, and they go, "You're not listening to me," and you repeat back everything you heard. You say, "See, I am listening to you." No, you heard the words. Listening is making the other person feel heard. So the fact that you were watching television, even though you were taking in the words that were spoken, the other person didn't feel heard because you weren't looking them in the eye and paying them and being present while they were talking to you. So listening is the art of making other people feel heard, validating the things they're saying, repeating back to them what you heard, saying it back to them in a different way. Let me make sure that I hear this right, and saying it back to them as you heard it, not just parroting back the language, looking them in the eye, not looking at your phone, not being distracted by other things around the room. And at the end, they will say, "Thank you for being present. Thank you for listening. Thank you for hearing me. I really appreciate it." So you haven't listened until somebody else has said that that you've done so.
Very often when people
again, listening requires at least two people, which means it's social, and so you don't get to determine that you have listened because it's a social interaction. For the same reason you don't get to determine whether you were clear with whatever you said until somebody else says, "I understand." It's the same thing.
I don't understand that. Sorry, maybe I'm.
That's okay.
If I don't get to determine it. But if I'm not listening, I'm determining it. You could be talking to me and I'm on my phone over here.
Yeah.
I'm determining that I'm not listening by actively not listening.
Well, you can be actively not listening. That's fine. You know when you're being an ass and being distracted. Yeah, but can you do the opposite? So if you know that you're actively ignoring someone or you prefer to zone out and look at your phone instead of, you know exactly the repercussions and how you're making them feel. Okay, so do the opposite. So it sounds like you do know.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, I get you. Now I get it. It's a very good counter argument. I get that. When we think about listening, a lot of times people go to problem solving. Which I've got you, Simon. I've got you, and this is what we should do. How do you think about that switch from listening to problem solving? And I've heard you say, when you've had friends that struggle, you just say, "Go on."
Mm-hmm.
Can you help me understand? Because I like to solve problems. I'm like, "Great, Simon, 1, 2, 3. What do you advise people who like to do problem solving, and what might be more beneficial?
Well, what you like might not be what is necessary in that moment. Again, you're making it about you. And if somebody comes to you and says, "I'm struggling," it really isn't about you. It's about them. So it doesn't matter if you like problem solving. They're asking for a safe space to feel heard. Now, if they ask, "What do you think? What do you think I should do?" Then by all means. Or you can say, "Can I offer some suggestions, or do you want me to just hold space?" It's not. You don't get to determine that. And so it's not that offering solutions is never the right answer. It's that you have to. This is what active listening is. It's a practice. You have to get good at it, and it's a work of constant improvement, of learning the subtleties and the nuances. We're social animals, and it's not always so easy to understand what people need in the time.
How do you know what they need in the time? I actually say this now to bluntly, my mother, who I go on walks with on Sunday. I'm like, "I don't need problems, or I don't need solutions. Just listen to me."
Yeah.
Or "I need sympathy. Just tell me I'm great."
Right. So in those cases, because your mom is giving you the wrong thing that you're looking for, you spoke up and told her what you need.
Yeah.
And hopefully she was able to do that. Now, are you doing that for your friends? Because you just said you like to give solutions and you like to be da 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 da. But what if they say, I just need to talk? I just need to talk. I just need you to listen. I just need to vent.
I don't find many people tell you what they need. They kind of expect you to interpret it.
Yeah, I mean, I think we all live with the fantasy that other people can read our mind.
Yeah.
So if somebody isn't being clear about what their needs are, then default to holding space. Let them get to the point of saying, "What do you think?" Default to just being a container for whatever they're going through, or ask permission. Is this good timing for me to tell you what I think you should do next, or do you want to save that for another conversation? Can we save that for another conversation? Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, ask. If you're not sure, ask. And this goes right back to the conversation we were just having about partnership, whether it's professional partnerships or personal partnerships. Don't make assumptions. Ask. If you cannot be crystal clear, if you cannot be 100% sure that what you think is actually true, then be curious, investigate, ask. People will tell you if you ask.
People will tell you if you ask if they are in an environment of safety.
Well, I mean, we're talking about friends here, so I'm assuming that there's a degree of friendship and trust.
Sure, but like a lot of relationships don't have an environment of safety where they feel, oh gosh, I should know X about his job. Oh gosh, he's going to get annoyed if I ask him who's Simon again, or who's Paul, or who's Sarah.
Yeah.
And so my question to you is, what can one do to create environments of safety, personal or professional, where people aren't afraid to ask those questions?
So because and you just said it, you're aware because you've been in those positions of what it feels like to be on that side. So relate to it, if you're working with somebody who's supposed to know something, but maybe they don't, they're lying, hiding, and faking because they don't want to be found out, right? Then if you're especially if you're in the position of leadership, say, hey, listen, I've been in your position before where, I said that I knew everything that I didn't, and I pretended I had answers that I didn't because I wanted to do right by my friend. I wanted to do right by my boss, whatever it was. And let me tell you, it got me nowhere. And I had to learn the hard way that when I just wasn't honest about what was wrong or what I was missing or what I didn't know, it eventually caught up with me. So even though it's uncomfortable, even though it's going to be difficult, and even though you probably don't want to do it, what I really hope is that if you don't know something, just ask me and I can tell you the answer. And that's much easier. So, and I've had this. I had somebody who worked for me years ago who couldn't, because her whole identity was based on her work. So if she did bad work or she screwed up on something, it was like her identity would come shattering down. So if she made a mistake, she would never admit it, to the point of lying to me. And I would be able to look at something and be like, this doesn't make sense. And she would come up with some crazy excuse about whatever it was. And as opposed to just saying, yeah, sorry, I screwed that up. And so, I would say to her, you and I are going to have fights more because when I can see that something doesn't add up, and I'm going to pummel you with questions until you're just honest with me, or you can just tell me what happened or that you screwed up or something's wrong, and I actually won't care. And I'll help you put it right, or I'll just give you another chance, or it doesn't matter. And it took a bunch of iterations, and I had to say that a bunch of times. I said, hey, by the way, if you lie to me, I'm going to pummel you. But if you're honest with me and it's a screw up or you missed something out, then you just tell me, I actually won't mind. And then one time, many times later, she went, sorry, I completely screwed that up. I'm like, all right, don't worry about it. Just, let me know when you redo the document and give it back to me, no problem. And she didn't get in trouble. And so it took a few times, but I stuck with it and, just sort of kept reminding her that if she takes the risk to tell me she screwed up, it's going to go better. It's going to go really well. But as a good leader, you have to create that environment, which means when somebody screws up, it has to go well. You can't just screaming and yelling at people because at some point they're going to stop telling you the truth.
Do you know why it creates an environment of acceptability of it not going well? People see, oh, well, they screwed up and he was fine. So, if we don't hit the numbers, he's going to be fine. How do you not create an environment?
No, we're talking about mistakes. And when you say hitting the numbers, do you scream and yell at people when they miss their numbers?
Depends on the reason.
What's the reason?
If it's
when do you scream at people for missing numbers?
If it's, oh, well, I didn't think about that and actually didn't bother doing it.
So you're not screaming at them for missing their numbers. You're screaming at them for being negligent or irresponsible.
Yes, that's the layer deeper to the why they didn't hit their numbers.
And so when you scream at them,
I wouldn't scream at people, to be honest.
Okay.
But I would get annoyed.
You get annoyed.
Yeah.
Okay. So when you get annoyed at something, what result are you hoping from that?
I'm hoping that they actually go, shit, I should have done this. I should have been more proactive. And next time I'm going to be on top of it.
And what if there's something underlying that you don't know about? What if their mum's in hospital with cancer?
Then I hope that I've created an environment where they can tell me also.
But if you're getting annoyed at people when they're missing the numbers versus saying, is everything okay?
Well, you can absolutely have a relationship where people will tell you that their mother's in hospital, but also say, Simon, I'm really annoyed.
Yeah.
And so I think I absolutely have that with people. But the why is really important. You know, as I said, if it's like, I didn't think about it, or I don't know.
But you're conflating a bunch of different circumstances here. You're conflating somebody who has checked out versus somebody who is conscientious. You know,
or someone who didn't go the extra mile. He didn't think proactively.
Yeah.
He didn't think strategically. He didn't think creatively.
Yeah, it's frustrating, for sure. And you know, sometimes the other thing is that we have to concern ourselves with, I think, is more important. It is what kind of reaction gets the best result out of other people. So some people, if you give them, if you're hard on them, you're going to have the opposite result. They're going to shut down, and you'll never get what you want, and it's going to get worse and worse and worse, because their personalities maybe need a little more tender love to help them. Where some people, when you're all tender with them, they completely lose respect for you and don't even and stop caring. So it's up to you not to give one size fits all, but to learn the kind of feedback that people thrive. So like for me, if I screwed up on something, just tell me. I'm good with it. Like, give me the blunt. I'm cool with it. You don't have to give me a compliment sandwich. You know, tell me the good thing I did. And when people start doing that to me,
a shit sandwich.
Yeah, like when people start doing that to me, I'm like, stop. Just tell me what you want fixed. Like, it's fine. I'm okay. You know, but that's how I like to receive feedback, right? Like people I work with on my team don't like receiving feedback the way I like to receive it. And so if I keep giving the feedback the way I like to receive it, it may not have the result that I want. Just because it works for me, it doesn't work for them. Just it doesn't mean it works for them. And so I've had to learn how other people like to receive feedback so that they can hear the thing and work with it. And so, you know, one size doesn't fit all. And so, yeah, if you know for sure that those folks in your team like to receive feedback the way you're giving it, then keep going. Then that seems no problem to me. But what if they don't? Then it's going to become self-fulfilling, and the performance is going to continue to decline, and you're going to get more frustrated, and you see how this movie plays out.
We talked about trust. We talked about trust, listening, safe spaces. When you think about your own leadership style, leading people today, what has changed most? Which elements have changed most?
I've gotten much better at delegating. You know, when I'm under stress, I micromanage. It makes sense, right? And so I still sometimes have the bad habit of doing that. When I'm under stress, or if I don't understand something, I ask a lot of questions, and sometimes it's taken as, or sometimes it come across as, sort of that I don't believe someone or don't trust them because I'm asking so many questions, like one after the other, after the other, after the other. And the reality is I just don't understand, or there's stress. I go into sort of like investigative mode or interrogator mode. So I've had to learn to be aware of that. I'm much better at not micromanaging, that when I ask somebody to get something done, I just assume that it's done, and you know, I'll find out if it's not. So learning to let go. I'm a reactor, so if bad news comes in, I sort of like get really frustrated really quickly, and then that goes away and I'm rational and normal. And so I've just had to learn to temper that as well, because other people don't know that I'm a reactor sometimes. If they know I'm a reactor, they'll ignore me for the first 3 minutes. Will I vent for a second or two, and then I'm fine? I
said this to my girlfriend when we started, and I said, like, I'm an entrepreneur, so I go up and down. You need to be the stable one, because if you think I'm going to be fine in 5 minutes, but I'm going to shout and scream for 5.
Yeah.
And setting that.
So as long as, again, this is going to be a very circular conversation. It goes back to communication. And what communication does is it provides context and sets expectations.
What do you still suck at as a leader? Or where do you most like to improve as a leader?
Well, like I said, I'm a reactor, so if I get news immediately, or like I said, I go into interrogation mode and sometimes I don't give context for that interrogation. So where I need to get better is I need to say, okay, I don't understand this, and this is what I don't understand, so I'm going to ask you a bunch of questions to get at it. Don't take it personally, it's me trying to understand, right? Need to say that at the beginning, not at the end after,
interrogation.
After the interrogation, right? So I need to be better at that, at setting context and providing so that people know what's happening. That would be I need to get better at that.
Can all of before we do a quick fire, can all of the lessons discussed today and ideas discussed today, can they be applied to parenting? When you have a child that is in their more formative years in physical and mental development, and there are very volatile situations, be it child emotion, how do you think about parenting effectively today, and can leadership principles be applied to being a great father?
The simple answer is yes. There's a lot of overlap. You're responsible for another human being. Well, great leadership is the awesome responsibility to see those around you rise. Well, that's kind of what a great parent is, right? Mm-hmm. You want to teach them confidence. You want to teach them skills. Sometimes it's correct to intervene, and sometimes it's correct to let them fall off the bicycle, scrape their knee, and pick it up and try again. Sometimes getting slapped around a little bit, bad choice of words, but sometimes getting hurt and falling off the bicycle and scraping your knees is okay.
Yeah.
So yeah, there is a lot of overlap.
What do you think doesn't apply?
Well, I can tell you one thing, that there's research that's been done on this, which is, we don't get everything from our parents. You have a brother and a sister, you have two siblings, and, same parents raised similarly in the same household, and they grew up to be completely, they're going completely different paths. I know one person, I know two siblings, one became a world famous ballerina, the other one went to jail. You couldn't get more opposite, paths from two siblings. But there's one thing the research shows, that across all cultures, every child learns from their parents, no matter what, which is how to treat yourself, how you treat yourself, and how you treat others. That comes from the parents. Teaching our kids to share, teaching our kids to listen, teaching our kids to take care of their friends when their friends are struggling, that's about the greatest thing you can ever give a child. And by the way, that's the greatest thing you can ever give a team, that to worry about how your teammates are doing. And it's not about your bonus, or are you hitting your numbers? Are you helping your teammates hit their numbers and get their bonuses? And that when you come to work and everybody's worried about and concerned about each other, the whole team rises and the numbers end up doing a lot better than everybody looking out just for themselves, which goes right back to the original question is, so what if I'm just motivated by money? Well, then it's only about you and your bonus, and sometimes it's at the expense of the team.
I'd love to do a quick fire round, Simon.
Sure.
Is that okay?
Yeah.
So what single piece of content has had the most impact on you? Many people have had one of your books, one of your talks as their most impactful. What has shaped most of your thinking?
I can't say what shaped most of my thinking, but what single piece of content has had the most impact on me? Star Wars. When you try and do things by yourself, it doesn't work. When you work as a team, it works. And a small group of people working together with common cause, come together as friends, looking out for each other, risking their lives to save each other. You can take on the whole empire.
What have you changed your mind on in the last 12 months?
So I love this idea of, in the last 12 months, I've sort of, when you're an entrepreneur, right? When you start a business, you believe desperately in your vision and what you're doing. You have to, because going out by yourself is completely stupid. And the first people you hire are your mates, who also believe desperately in what you're doing. And belief becomes currency, like we're a team of believers, right? And as the organization starts to grow, belief in the cause becomes the currency by which we judge others. But the problem is at some point, if you achieve any kind of real scale, that actually can cloud and blind your vision of other people on the team. So for example, you might have someone on the team who's a negative Nelly. All they do is talk about all the problems. All they do is talk about all the things that aren't working. And you accuse them of being non-believers. And you push them out of the organization, or you marginalize them, or you're like, oh, I don't have a meeting with them again. God, all they do is talk about the negative things. And now the standard of belief has been, it's become dangerous, because now what you're doing is now you're creating an echo chamber around yourself. And now you're only surrounding yourself with people who believe and see the world the way you see it. And the reality is there are different kinds of dissenters, right? There are negative dissenters or destructive dissenters. So a negative dissenter is somebody who all they do is point out all the problems, but then they stand on the sidelines and just talk about all the problems, right? There's destructive dissenters, which is they're actually like sabotaging to prove the point, right? Those people you have to get out of an organization. Absolutely. I had, we've all worked with people who all they do is complain and never roll up their sleeves. Get those people out. But there are people who are productive dissenters who, they have a natural inclination, and dare I call it a gift, for seeing all the things that are wrong, all the problems and all the cracks. And all they do is talk about all the things that are wrong and all the cracks. And if you live in that echo chamber, you're going to be too quick to label them negative Nelly and want to push them out of the organization because they don't believe, or they don't just see the positive. But the reality is they roll up their sleeves every night and they stay there till the end, and they're super trying to fix the problem as well, and they're part of the team, and they are some of the most valuable people on the team. And so entrepreneurs make this mistake over and over and over again. As you start to have some sort of scale, you push the people out who are showing you the things that aren't working in your own company and are willing to stick around and fix.
It's a super weird one. I've literally watched every interview of yours and listened to 99% of your talks that are online. Mm-hmm. What have you not talked about before or never been asked that you wish you had been?
I mean, there's an infinite number of things that I have never talked about, and I don't think I've wished to be asked anything. When I show up for something, it's not about me. I always say to any interview that I give, ask me the questions that your audience needs to hear. Like, your audience better than I do. Mm-hmm. You, I hope, are here to serve them. Mm-hmm. Well, ask me the things you think they need to hear. Some of those things I've been asked before, and some of those things I haven't. And so I have no agenda. I'm not here to sell my stuff or promote my book or all that crap that a lot of people show up in these things for. They come in to talk about themselves and huck their products. No, I come with a giver's heart. You ask me the questions you think they need to hear, and some of those I've been asked before and some of those I haven't.
Which leaders most inspired you?
A lot of the leaders who inspire me are not household names. A lot of them I've had the honor of writing about, because after I got to know them, when I discovered them, I became enamored with them. And I mentioned before, I like to share, and I would be selfish if I kept their lessons and their genius to myself. And so I've written about a lot of leaders that I love. So Bob Chapman, I wrote about extensively in Leaders Eat Last. He's remarkable and a dear, dear, dear friend and mentor. He didn't start off that way. He started off as a guy I wanted to write about, and he's become a dear friend and mentor. I've written about Laurie Robinson and Johnny Bravo. I've written about all these folks, Ron Bruder, Tom Staggs. These are people who I look up to tremendously.
What does success mean to you?
Success is, for me, is contributing to something bigger than myself, and I think of it always in terms of momentum rather than absolutes. A lot of people have absolute definitions of success, achieving this number of clicks, likes, dollars, pounds, whatever, reaching a certain level of something very finite. And I'm more inspired by momentum. So, my go-to is all of the founders of the women's suffrage movement in the United States had died of natural causes before the first woman voted. That's amazing to me, right? Now, did they die depressed? No. Would they have liked to have lived to see the first woman vote? Of course. But do you think they died with the feeling of failure? No. They died with the belief that they had started something that took on so much momentum that other people had taken their cause and made it their own, and they died with absolute confidence that at some point it would work. And that, for me, is to that other people take up the torch is what it's all about.
You founded the Optimism Company. You are an optimist. Mm-hmm. What do you say to yourself when you're just down? Sometimes there's no reason, but you're just down.
Yeah, it's okay. I think we make a big mistake. There's much conversation these days about mental health. And I don't like the term mental health because it sounds like a standard, that if you don't have total health, you are mentally unhealthy, which is not true and not fair. I believe in mental fitness, right? Which is something you're constantly working on. And if you are a normal human being, you will have a range of emotions. Some of them will feel good and some of them will not feel good. That makes you human. I would be worried about anybody who gets stuck in any of those. So if you're only feeling sad, then yes, there's probably an intervention that's required of some sort. But if all you do is have euphoria and you have no negative emotions, that's equally as unhealthy. So if I have a down day, if I'm just sad, then I just label it. I'm sad today. And people are like, how are you feeling? I'm like, I'm sad today. Do you know why? I don't. I'm just sad today. It's okay. It's like a good human being has a range of emotions, and I hope to feel all of them.
How do you detach yourself from the numbers, from the book sales, from the shares, from the likes? As you said, your why is your impact on people and sharing. When a video doesn't hit like it could do, or like others have done, when a book doesn't hit like it could do what others have done, or when it does, how do you detach yourself from tying happiness and emotion to likes?
Well, I haven't defined myself by those things, right? Am I disappointed? Of course I'm disappointed, especially if I put a lot of work into something. But sometimes, but it's on to the next. It's like I'm not hanging my whole life and identity onto one thing. I do many things. And the joke is like, depending on where the metrics are, like I can look at one metric and be like, I'm a king. And I can look at a different metric and be like, I'm a failure, right? Or especially if you make it relative, like if I look at one metric relative to somebody else, I'd be like, I'm boss. If I look at one metric relative to somebody else, I'd be like, I'm a freaking loser. So, what did Teddy Roosevelt say? Comparison is the thief of joy. I've learned that I can have worthy rivals, that I can compare, that I can find what other people are doing that's better than me so that I can learn from them. But I've practiced very hard comparing my success to me, that I'm looking to, that for the metrics that I've determined that are important to me to grow relative to my metrics, not other people's metrics, because you're never going to be the smartest, you're never going to be the prettiest, you're never going to be, the most successful, you're never going to be the richest. And for people who come up to me like, well, actually, Simon, our company actually is the biggest, I always say, for now. Like, nothing lasts, nothing. Well, actually, I hold more gold medals than it. Look, for now, sure, for now. Like it's all temporary. Every record gets broken at some point.
Are you scared of death?
Am I scared of death?
I'm terrified of dying.
I'm scared of death in the same sense as I think anybody else is. I'm not. I don't get thrills from staring.
But
death
like
in the
I
face.
like active when someone says about death, I'm actually terrified.
I'm scared of death, because I like living. I kind of enjoy it, But
the way you said that, it was this very acceptance of finite.
I accept mortality. Like I hate to break it to you, but this doesn't end well. Like, like I don't know how to put it to you, but
Asaf lied to me.
Like you're gonna die, right? So if you can accept that is the case, the question is, how do you ensure that your ideas will live on through your work and through the people who've been through your life? That people will say of you, I am who I am today and I'm a better version of myself because you were my friend, right? Like, do you live your life that one day people would say that? Do you build your business so that people say, whether I stayed there for a short term or a long term, I'm a better version of myself because I worked at this company. To me, that makes it, I think, that's the path that I've chosen for myself anyway.
Final one for you. When you think about the Optimism Company, when you think about 10 years out, what do you want to build?
So I hate the term soft skills. Everybody talks about hard skills and soft skills. I hate the term soft skills. There's nothing soft about them, and hard and soft are opposites. And these things are not opposite skills. They're complementary skills. And so I believe in human skills. Hard skills are the skills you need to learn to do your job, obviously, and I need you to excel at that. And human skills, the skills you need to learn to be a better human being. And when you learn the skills of being a better human being, like how to listen actively, how to have empathy, how to have a difficult conversation, how to have an effective confrontation, how to give or receive feedback, turns out it's good for business and it's good for relationships. And so I want somebody to excel at hard skills and human skills. And so we're building the Optimism Company to be the go-to place for anybody who's looking to improve their human skills. And so when you ask me what does the Optimism Company look like in 10 years, that I can say with great pride that we are having a positive contribution, a positive impact in the lives of people who have improved their human skills because of the stuff that we've been offering.
Simon, I can't thank you enough for doing this. I can't thank
My
you
pleasure.
enough for putting up with me. It's been a huge pleasure.
No, it's a real honor. Thanks for having me on. I really appreciate it. Thanks so much.
You're a star, my friend. Thank you.